All right, welcome back. This just in, adding to a chorus of at least two Republican congressional leaders now. Republican Congressman of Texas, Will Hurd, just released a statement in response to President Trump's travel ban, saying it poses a danger to Americans. Hurd saying this, quote, "A one-size-fits-all solution is not the way to solve one of the most complex national security challenges we face, Islamic terrorism." Hurd goes on to say, quote, "We cannot fight the scourge of Islamic extremism alone. This visa ban is the ultimate display of mistrust and will erode our allies' willingness to fight with us. The ban also provides terrorists with another tool to gain sympathy and recruit new fighters," end quote. Now, we're also hearing new details of President Trump's phone call that took place today with the King of Saudi Arabia. White House correspondent Athena Jones is live for us at the White House with more on this. Athena.
Hi, Fred. That's right. We have a readout from that call with King Salman bin Abdulaziz Al Saud, the King of Saudi Arabia. It's a pretty fulsome readout. He's the first of the three world leaders the president was expected to talk to today. In the readout, it says that the two leaders reaffirmed the longstanding friendship and strategic partnership between the United States and Saudi Arabia. They talked about strengthening joint efforts to fight the spread of radical Islamic terrorism and working jointly to address the challenges to regional peace and security, including in Syria and Yemen. But here's one of the most interesting things about this statement. It says that the president requested and the king agreed to support safe zones in Syria and Yemen, as well as supporting other ideas to help the many refugees who are displaced by the ongoing conflicts. Now, you'll remember that this idea of safe zones is something that candidate Trump ran on in order to help deal with the refugee crisis. But this idea of safe zones is something that the Obama administration did not think would work. They thought it would be something that would not serve the purpose that Trump is saying it will. Another interesting part of this statement is that the two leaders agreed on the importance of rigorously enforcing the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action with Iran. What is that? That is the Iran nuclear deal, the very same deal that President Trump said he did not like, said that he would consider pulling out of. So it's interesting to hear a reaffirmation of a commitment to the Iran nuclear deal. One more thing in this statement, it says that the two leaders agreed to additional steps to strengthen bilateral economic and energy cooperation. So a pretty substantive statement from what sounds like a substantive phone call with the Saudi king. Fred?
All right, Athena Jones, thank you so much at the White House. Appreciate it. All right, as we continue to monitor protests and marches across the U.S., still a lot of confusion and anxiety inside American airports. At least 109 people were detained at U.S. Customs after Trump signed this executive order. But after federal judges in several cities granted an emergency stay for citizens subject to the travel ban, some were released. Many still await their fate. Let's talk more about all of this with CNN Global Affairs analyst David Rohde and CNN International Diplomatic Editor Nick Robertson. So, David, Senators John McCain and Lindsey Graham say this is a self-inflicted wound in the fight against terror. Do you agree?
Yes. I mean, in the long term, I think it is. This is a sort of struggle for the future of Islam between the sort of, radical vision of ISIS and then the vast majority of Muslims who are moderate. So we need allies on the ground, Muslims who will fight alongside U.S. troops, Muslims who will really lead the fight. I mean, that's what's happening in Iraq. It's Iraqis that are retaking Mosul, not there's a small number of Americans there. So this will alienate Muslims. I know the administration says this is not a ban on Muslims, but it's being interpreted that way. Reuters, where I work, we're a global news service. We hear nothing but confusion from around the globe, from foreign officials, and particularly from the Middle East, what this means. And just in your last report, this mention of safe areas again in Syria, more confusion. Does that mean that American troops are going to go into Syria and create these safe havens? It's all very confusing to people in the region.
Okay, and then, gentlemen, just bear with me now because we just received a new statement coming from the Office of the Press Secretary at the White House. This on the issue of vetting. We know there have been a lot of observations made, people who were stopped have already either have their green cards or perhaps they were refugees and they already endured 2 years of a very rigorous vetting process. And so this statement now, I'm going to read the whole thing for you, so bear with me. It says, America is a proud nation of immigrants, and we will continue to show compassion to those fleeing oppression, but we will do so while protecting our own citizens and border. America has always been the land of the free and home of the brave. We will keep it free and keep it safe, as the media knows but refuses to say. My policy is similar to what President Obama did in 2011 when he banned visas for refugees from Iraq for 6 months. The 7 countries named in the executive order are the same countries previously identified by the Obama administration as sources of terror. To be clear, this is not a Muslim ban, as the media is falsely reporting. This is not about religion. This is about terror and keeping our country safe. There are over 40 different countries worldwide that are majority Muslim, and they are not affected by this order. We will again be issuing visas to all countries once we are sure we have reviewed and implemented the most secure policies over the next 90 days. I have tremendous feelings for the people involved in the horrific humanitarian crisis in Syria. My first priority will always be to protect and serve our country, but as president, I will find ways to help all those who are suffering. This a reflection of the sentiment of the President of the United States is coming from the Office of the Press Secretary at the White House. So, Nick, will any of that statement appease some of the anxiety that is being expressed, whether it be by protests that we're seeing across the country in the airports, or perhaps even by allies across the country, across the world?
You know, let's talk about allies. Let's talk about the most recent and strongest ally. Theresa May came to visit President Trump just a couple of days ago, finds herself now at a variance with him, has had to distance herself from that policy that's costing her politically back home. The leader of the opposition party there tweeted that President Trump shouldn't be allowed to come to Britain, asked people to sign a protest. He's supposed to be coming on a state visit later this year, asked people to sign a protest against that. And in his tweet, he described the ban as a Muslim ban. So, you know, when you have, you know, leading politicians from countries in Europe seeing it that way, articulating it that way, we have a joint statement from the French and the Dutch foreign ministers this evening, both countries that are very concerned about Trump-type politics because that's fueling significant opposition parties, nationalist, populist parties in their countries, have issued a statement saying that they think it's confusing, that they think this doesn't get to the core values, and they think that it's counterproductive to tackle terrorism. And these are countries, France in particular, very much on the front line of trying to deal with a very significant and major terrorist threat within its own borders. So, you know, the message at the moment is being perceived outside as a Muslim ban. And if you look in Iraq, there at some of the forces that are working alongside the US to fight ISIS in Mosul, in the north of the country, some of them are Shia militias. Some of those Shia militias that are backed by the government, support the Iraqi army, are calling for US forces to be removed from the country. So, you know, that's not something the Iraqi government supports. But you get this sort of feedback from the rest of the world that does interpret it as a Muslim ban. That's their own interpretation.
Nick and David, I want to bring in Athena Jones. She's at the White House. She's with us now as this statement was just released. So, Athena, you know, the headline here on the statement says, you know, this is a statement on the extreme vetting, but it also sounds like it's more of a justification for any actions that this White House feels is fit to best secure this nation. Is it going to be received that way?
We'll see. I do think this is what's very clear about this statement is that we know that President Trump is a huge consumer of the news media, of cable news, of network news, of newspapers, and we know that he has been watching a lot of his statements and actions over the last several days have certainly appeared to be direct responses to things that he's seen on TV. And so that's why you have it in a statement, which is pretty unusual, at least in terms of the last 8 years or so, to see a statement that directly references the media a couple of times times. He talks about how America has always been the land of the free and the home of the brave. We will keep it free, keep it safe, as the media knows but refuses to say. He goes on to talk about how President Obama did something similar, suspending or banning visas for refugees from Iraq for 6 months in 2011. He also says the 7 countries named in the executive order are the same countries previously identified by the Obama administration as sources of terror. Now, if you talk to folks in the Obama administration, they'd say it's just saying that a country might need some extra scrutiny is not the same thing as imposing a travel ban. You've heard from a lot of officials saying that when it comes to refugees, for instance,